This week on Heroes Made in the USA, heroes making and breaking records. Former basketball coach John Wooden took UCLA where no team had gone before, to 10 NCAA championships. And so far, they're still alone. When she swam the freezing waters of the Bering Strait, Lynne Cox blazed a trail into Russian territory, swimming history, and the annals of medical science. 11-year-old John Kevin Hill saw a blank space in the Guinness Book of Records and filled it with his own historic flight across the United States.
Hi, I'm Joe Namath. Welcome to Heroes Made in the USA. Today's show celebrates heroes who make and break records. Heroes like former UCLA basketball coach John Wooden. Right here in Pauley Pavilion, between 1964 and 1975, he led UCLA to an unprecedented 10 national championships, guaranteeing himself a permanent place in sports history. It wasn't just what John Wooden did at UCLA between 1964 and 1975. It was the way he did it, the impressions he made on the young men who played on those 10 championship teams.
John Wooden's leadership, his ability to communicate with people is just incredible.
He's able to keep things in the proper perspective. And as a result, he became successful. And I think his players, he passed that on to.
You can't divorce what he taught from basketball. His ideas for living related directly to his ideas about basketball and vice versa.
A lot of the lessons he taught us has carried on for me, from not just basketball, but in my life after basketball also.
For all his victories and acclaim, John Wooden thought of himself as a teacher who enjoyed team practices more than he did the actual games. Ironically, UCLA wasn't even his first choice when he was offered the job back in 1948.
I had the opportunity to take the position at the University of Minnesota, and I had decided to accept that. But there was one little problem. So the athletic director had to meet with some of the members of the Board of Trustees and was supposed to call me at I think it was 6 o'clock in the evening, and the call didn't come through. I'm somewhere.
When UCLA called on time an hour later, Wooden accepted the offer and changed the course of basketball history. He had played on championship teams in high school and at Purdue University, where he was an All-American 3 years in a row. John Wooden knew the game as well as anybody when he arrived at UCLA, which had a terrible reputation.
We were picked unanimously by everyone practically to finish last in the conference the next year, and we won the conference and won 22 games my first year.
But it would be another 16 years before he would win his first national championship with the Bruins. It was during that time, though, that Coach Wooden began to develop what he called his pyramid of success.
I worked on this pyramid for 14 years after developing the definition for success, which is at the apex of the pyramid, and that's where we want to try to get. My definition of success is peace of mind, which can be attained only through self-satisfaction in knowing that you made the effort to become the best that you're capable of becoming. And you're the only one who'll ever know that.
Yeah, Charlie, man. Okay, let's get the first team out here.
The key to becoming the best in basketball, Coach Wooden believed, was practice, practice, and more practice. And that tradition continues today at UCLA because of 4 coaches who all played on John Wooden's championship team.
He was a stickler for making sure that the little things were the things that we worked on. And there's an old saying, it's the little things that make the big things happen. And he's the best at zeroing in on little finite details. And that's why he built the dynasty.
During his glory years at Pauley Pavilion, he coached some of the finest players in college basketball history. Lou Alcindor, today known as Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Bill Walton, Gail Goodrich, Walt Hazzard, and many others. But even the best admit they needed Coach Wooden.
You can have the best individuals and put them on the court, and they can lose to a team that is a better working unit. He really understood that and understood what to do in order to get the best out of our team potential.
But John Wooden's coaching philosophy went deeper than just the pursuit of victory.
I played on teams under him that won 73 games in a row. Never once did he say, let's go out and win this one. I mean, he never made a big deal about it.
But I constantly was mentioning, make the effort to do the best you're capable of doing. When the game's over, I want your head up. And the score shouldn't have anything to do with it.
Basketball was just a vehicle of understanding a greater understanding, and that's what he taught.
And that same philosophy accounts for why John Wooden hardly ever got excited over a victory or upset over a defeat.
It's an extracurricular part of life, that's all. Just as it's an extracurricular part of being a student at UCLA. I didn't want excessive exuberation because you outscored somebody in a basketball game. Neither did I want excessive dejection because someone outscored you.
Be prepared, give it your best, and keep it in perspective. The keys to John Wooden's approach to basketball and to life. Now, well into his 70s, he sets the same example today. He still keeps a busy schedule of speaking engagements, motivational seminars, and basketball camps.
I consider as one of the finest compliments that I've ever received that Coach Wooden's teams stayed closer to their level of competency than most teams. They didn't have the peaks and valleys that many of us seem to have. Well, that pleased me because that's what I was working for.
Coming up next on Heroes Made in the USA, the determined young woman who swam the Bering Strait into history, and an 11-year-old youngster who flew a plane into the Guinness Book of Records.
The making and breaking of records are more than just excuses for celebrations. They are the yardsticks of man's progress and civilization. More importantly, they are the gauntlets that challenge us to improve and better ourselves and our world. Take our next hero, Lynne Cox, for example. She recently became the first person to swim the icy waters of the Bering Strait and not only made a record for herself, but huge strides for mankind.
All the kids in the town, they sat down around me and asked me, you know, how cold was the water and will you come back here again?
To the children of Little Diomede, Alaska, Lynne Cox is a hero. On August 7, 1987, she did what no human being has done before, bridge the gap between the United States and the Soviet Union by swimming across it. Lynne, who lives in Southern California, began training for the Bering Strait more than a year in advance, swimming upwards of 30 miles of ocean each day at dawn when the water is at its coldest.
You can become really numb and you can lose your sense of judgment. You can become really confused mentally. If you get into extreme cold, you can die.
But Lynne is no stranger to the dangers of marathon swimming. She crossed the English Channel almost 20 years ago.
I'd always wanted to swim the English Channel since I was probably 8 or 9 years old. And I don't know why, I just heard about it and decided that that was something that I wanted to do. So my folks supported me on that, and the next year I went and broke the records for it.
Lynne went on to not only break more records, but to swim new waters, including the Strait of Magellan, the icy Aleutian Islands, and Alaska's Glacier Bay.
People want to find out how you can acclimatize better to cold water, but also for the medical community. It's how can you use this, for instance, for rewarming people after they've been in surgery? Are there better ways to rewarm people after they've been involved in hypothermia accidents, where they've been sort of snowed in or they've fallen under the water and the ice? We're going to be looking at the core temperature changes, which are the internal body temperature, and use a thermal pill to monitor those changes. I'll swallow a little pill that will transmit to a receiver on the boat.
Are you getting tired? No. Are you?
For Lynne, the true test of endurance has not been in the water. It has been cutting through red tape.
Perhaps the most difficult part is getting the Soviet approval on it and getting their permission just to touch the shore. To swim is a gesture of goodwill that we're going to, or beyond extremes, to try to reach out and say that we would like to work with you and say that instead of being worlds apart, we are neighbors and we need to work together.
In that spirit, Lynne Cox and her team went to Alaska with still no definitive word from the Soviet Union. When they finally did get approval, Lynne stood face to face with her greatest obstacle, the Bering Strait.
It was awful. The swells were like 6 to 8 feet high, and the wind was 45 knots, and it scared the heck out of me.
The next day, Lynne's swim was a reality. Americans and Soviets alike stood poised for the event.
It was really cold when I first entered the water. It was about 43 degrees. and it was a surprise because I anticipated being able to get into the water gradually. And what happened was there's no beach, and so I had to slide into the water and go, touch the shore and go, and so it's a real shock to your system. So I started swimming, and it was extremely foggy. Our visibility was like 50 yards, and so we couldn't see exactly what direction we're going in. We kept heading toward the west and kept looking for the Soviets because they were going to meet us when we got halfway across, and we couldn't see anything. And the water was extremely cold. I was wondering if they were going to meet us at all. And once we got beyond the international date line, we saw a launch of the Soviet people coming out to meet us.
Although Lynne was now a mere 100 yards from the Russian shore, the Soviets had planned for her to land a half-mile farther south.
I kept thinking, you know, should I get out now or should I finish where they are? But one of the biggest parts of the swim was to use it as a gesture of goodwill. So I turned and swam into the current, and I reached the Soviet shore. And then they had a tea party for us, where they had real china on this beach in Siberia.
Meanwhile, on the Alaskan border, others awaited signs of Lynne's return.
Immediately after the swim was over, the whole island of Little Diamond came out to greet us. There are about 170 Eskimos that live on the island there. It was really neat.
I think I feel like a person that just sets high goals and tries to achieve them.
This, to me, showed that there's hope in the world, that through sports, through anything that we have in common, we can bypass a lot of the obstacles that keep us from working together, be it with the United States and Soviet Union or with other countries as well. So it showed me that there's hope in the world for great things to happen.
Coming up next on Heroes Made in the USA, a pint-sized pilot takes his place among aviation giants, and hometown hero David Holt.
Our next hero supports a theory that heroes are born rather than made. Now, what is it that makes an 11-year-old kid want to tackle the man-sized job of piloting a plane over 3,000 miles across the United States? Whatever it is, we submit it was present in other historical aviators at an early age, and that young John Kevin Hill has even greater accomplishments in store for himself and America's future in aviation and space.
When I woke up that morning, getting dressed, and I was just thinking about my takeoff at the airport, I got butterflies in my stomach.
John Kevin Hill is like any other 11-year-old boy. He likes to go fishing, play football, and ride his bike. He wants to become an astronaut and someday set a world record.
Morning, Mike.
Morning, John.
How you doing, Mike?
Morning, pretty good.
How's your day?
It's a good day for flying.
Okay, glad to see you.
Good to see you, too.
On the morning of June 22nd, 1987, John Kevin prepared to leave for Los Angeles. His essential equipment included 3 pillows that enabled him to see out the windows. And on June 24th, his historic flight would take him from Los Angeles, California, to Loveland, Colorado, to St. Louis, Missouri, and finally Washington, D.C., where he would land himself in the record books as the youngest pilot ever to make a transcontinental flight.
When we left California, I had me, Mike, and 1 reporter. And then when we got in Colorado, we picked up another reporter. Mike had to fly with me because I couldn't fly by myself, so Mike had to come along. But I had to fly the plane by myself.
But taking risks is nothing new for John Kevin. Neither is feeling the pain that is sometimes the result.
When I was 7 years old, I got struck by a truck and riding a motorcycle out in a big field. I broke my leg and I was in a body cast for a year. It was very hard to move around.
John's the kind of person that's determined. No, this body cast is not going to stop me. And although he was just in the 1st grade, he found a way to get a pair of crutches and he walked with a full body cast on.
When John got back on his feet, he decided to put his parents' minds at ease. He traded in his motorcycle for an all-terrain vehicle, and he also had another idea.
John Kevin Hill came in for a discovery flight, and a discovery flight is basically just a 15, 20-minute flight in an airplane just to let somebody see what it's like to fly in a plane.
He told us that John had natural ability to be a pilot, and John kept on practicing and got a confidence.
John was then 9 years old. 2 years and 260 flying hours later, he prepared to make a dream come true.
He checked out the Guinness Book of World Records and found that there was no category for a child who is young enough to fly any great distance. So he talked to his dad and everything, and they thought, well, if he wanted to do something this summer, he could fly like from coast to coast.
The plan was put into action, but the journey wasn't without its dangers.
When I was flying over the Rockies, it had a lot of turbulence, and I was going up and down and sideways. So it was real hard to fly the plane because the wind.
He developed a nosebleed, high altitude, and they were on oxygen. And we were talking to him in Denver, and it was a little bit scary for us there.
The crew landed safely in Loveland, Colorado, where John received the key to the city and a parade in his honor. John enjoyed the stay, but longed to get back into the sky.
I fly because the danger in it, and because I like to have fun, doing a lot of tricks up in the air.
He really likes to go into a Top Gun stunt where he takes it straight up and drops it straight down, and it kind of goes into zero gravity, everything floats around. So I know what kind of kid he is, and I made him promise not to do this to Mom. He liked to do the uphills, downhills, drop the plane, watch Mom yell.
John Kevin continued on to St. Louis, Missouri, but the flight wasn't always eventful.
I didn't like autopilot because he had nothing to do. Sometimes I would play tic-tac-toe or hangman with a reporter or Mike.
But what seemed dull and easily accomplished took many months of preparation and education.
You do lots of studying in the plane and on the ground.
The upwind will make our first turn to crosswind at 1,300 feet. That's indicated. Right here we make our first radio call when we enter downwind. He's a fast learner. His hand and eye coordination is excellent, which enables him to fly the plane. It helps out quite a bit. Some people are naturals flying in an airplane, and he's one of them.
On July 1st, 1987, the single-engine Cessna broke through the clouds over Washington National Airport 1 week after leaving Los Angeles. And it was John Kevin's parents who cheered the loudest.
To see him come in with his thumbs up, I knew that I was just a real proud father.
John Kevin Hill is back home again. Just give him a fishing pole, his best friend Todd, and a pond in Arlington, Texas, and he'll be happy to limit his fame to a page in the record books. Well, maybe not right now.
I want to go on a trip around the world in a couple years to break another record. When I'm flying, I'm up in the sky and I'm looking over the world, and I'm up there by myself and I'm flying through the clouds, and it's real neat.
And now, this week's hometown hero. Esquire magazine selected this man for its register of men and women under 40 who are changing America. His name is David Holt, and his specialty is mountain music. For half his life, he's collected his material from the front porches of his neighbors in the Appalachian Mountains. David is a historian and a performer.
They love it, I can sense that they really love it. But there's going to be one or two that it'll really hit deeply. And maybe those one or two will go out there and collect the songs and learn the songs and keep the whole thing going in the next generation. I feel like it's part of my responsibility to do that.
For sharing America's cultural heritage with the children of the world, David Holt is this week's hometown hero.
As we've seen on today's show, American heroes take the competitive spirit to the limits of physical endurance and the imagination.